My name is Cassian, and I need to tell you about a man whose work you already use, whose ideas are in your children's schools, on your wine labels, in hospitals across Europe, and whose name was deliberately separated from everything he built. Because what he built was preparation for something he said was coming, and it's here. In 1917, this man described something that should not have been possible. He called it the eighth sphere, a phantom dimension, a counterfeit reality being constructed deliberately to capture human consciousness. He said it feeds on one specific thing: human imagination redirected into images that look real but are spiritually dead, experiences that feel like living but develop nothing, hours of inner life, consumed, processed, dissolved, feeding something that is not human and does not have your interests in mind. He said this in 1917. I want you to think about what you did on your phone in the last 3 hours. The scroll, the feed, the images, watched, processed, forgotten, the hours that vanished and left your consciousness not more alive, but less. And then I want to tell you who this man was, what else he saw coming, and why almost everything he built was quietly taken apart. If your child has attended a Waldorf school, you know this man. If you've bought a bottle of biodynamic wine, you know this man. If you've used Willeda skincare or Dr. Hauschka cosmetics or visited a holistic medical clinic in Germany or Switzerland, you know this man. You just don't know his name, and you definitely don't know that all of those things, the schools, the farms, the medicine, the cosmetics, were designed by one person as components of a single system, not as lifestyle products, not as alternative brands, as preparation for something specific, something he said was coming. His name was Rudolf Steiner, and the thing he was preparing humanity for is here. New Year's Eve, 1922, Dornach, Switzerland. Inside the Goetheanum, a building unlike anything that existed on Earth, carved entirely from wood by thousands of volunteers from across Europe. Every surface designed to be a living expression of spiritual realities made visible. Not a church, not a theater, but a space built to thin the boundary between the physical world and the one behind it. A building you didn't just look at, but that worked on your consciousness, the way music works on your emotions, below the threshold of ordinary awareness. It took years to carve. A celebration was underway inside, and someone set it on fire. Steiner stood outside and watched it burn. Witnesses described him as completely still, not destroyed, not panicked, present, in the way that only a man who perceives realities beyond the physical can be present when the physical is being taken from him. He reportedly said very little. He had already begun redesigning in his mind. The man who stood watching had delivered over 6,000 lectures. He had designed a school system now operating in over 60 countries, a medical system practiced in hospitals across Europe, an agricultural method used on vineyards and farms worldwide, a movement art, an architectural philosophy, and a comprehensive map of the evolution of human consciousness across cosmic epochs. He had done this in roughly 25 years while giving an average of 1 lecture per day, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. By morning, the goetheanum was ash. By the following week, Steiner was designing the second one. Reinforced concrete, same spiritual principles, unburnable, and remarkably, it still stands today. They couldn't destroy the work by burning it. So eventually they did something more effective. They kept the buildings and removed the fire. In his final published essay, written in 1925, months before he died, as if it was the most urgent thing he needed to communicate, Steiner described a hierarchy of forces in the cosmos. Above physical nature, the etheric forces of life, the astral forces of consciousness, the spiritual forces of pure being. These are the forces that make you alive, aware, and capable of inner experience. Below physical nature, in what Steiner called subnature, are 3 forces that are essentially cosmic creative powers that have fallen below the threshold of the material world. Electricity is fallen light, not a metaphor. Steiner meant this as a perceptible spiritual reality. What was once the creative light of the cosmos, the force that illuminates both physical vision and spiritual perception, compressed, hardened, and stripped of its living quality, until it became the mechanical force that powers your devices. Magnetism is fallen sound, fallen cosmic word, the creative logos that ancient traditions said spoke the world into existence, now collapsed into a force that carries data through the air as invisible signals. A nuclear force, the most subnatural of all, is fallen life itself, the etheric force that animates every living thing, inverted into the most destructive power humanity has ever harnessed. Every device you own runs on fallen light. Every wireless signal reaching you right now is carried by fallen cosmic sound. Every nuclear power plant hums with inverted life force. Your entire digital existence operates in the realm of subnature, in forces that Steiner said pull consciousness downward, below the threshold of living nature, into a domain humans were never meant to inhabit, without corresponding upward spiritual development. He wrote this before television, before computers, before the internet, before smartphones, before any of it existed. His final message to humanity was essentially this: technology will pull you below nature, into subnature, into a realm where consciousness becomes a function of the machine rather than a quality of the spirit. And unless you develop forces that pull you equally above nature, you will lose your humanity, not dramatically, not in a flash, gradually, comfortably, the way a person falls asleep, not all at once, but in slow, barely perceptible increments, until the waking world has been replaced entirely by the dream. And the dream will be efficient. The dream will be convenient. The dream will anticipate your needs and meet them before you're even conscious of having them. And that is precisely what makes it dangerous, and here is where it enters your body. Steiner described an entity, not a metaphor, an actual being, that enters every human body shortly before birth, and inhabits the electrical forces of the nervous system for the duration of your life. He called it the double, the ahrimanic doppelganger. This being is what makes your body interface with technology. The electrical impulses that allow you to operate devices, to respond to screens, to process digital information at speeds your conscious mind can barely track. The double facilitates that connection. It lives in the subnatural dimension of your own physiology. It is, in a very precise sense, the part of you that belongs to the machine world rather than the living world. Steiner said the double also generates specific geographic effects, that certain illnesses are caused by the double's relationship with electromagnetic forces. He said this entity is the reason humans experience unexplained unease in certain places and inexplicable comfort in others. The double responds to the electromagnetic character of the earth beneath your feet. But the effect that matters most right now, the one you can verify in the next 10 seconds, is the pull toward the screen. The compulsion to check the phone that doesn't feel like a decision, it feels like a craving, something almost physical, something in the body rather than the mind. The way your hand reaches for the device before your consciousness has even formed the intention to reach, you're watching a video about spiritual development. And somewhere in the last 5 minutes, your hand drifted toward the phone, or you thought about checking a notification, or something in you wanted to open another tab. Not because you decided to, because something decided for you. That's not habit. That's not dopamine. Though the dopamine system is the physiological mechanism the double operates through. Steiner would say, that's the ahrimanic being in your nervous system recognizing its native element, electricity, subnature, the fallen forces, and reaching for it the way a plant reaches for light, the way a fish moves toward water, an entity finding its home. Tonight, not as philosophy, as experiment, put your phone on the other side of the room and notice what happens. Not what you think will happen, what actually happens. Notice that the pull doesn't come from your thinking. It comes from somewhere below your thinking, somewhere in the body, somewhere that feels almost like a second will operating inside your own, a will that wants what you didn't decide to want, that reaches for what you didn't choose to reach for. That's the double, and Steiner described it a century before the device it's reaching for existed. He even said the double leaves the body at the moment of death, which means this entity, this subnatural passenger, it was with you for exactly as long as you have a nervous system, and not 1 second longer. It belongs to the body, not to you. Steiner didn't just describe forces and entities in isolation. He described a strategy, being executed by a specific intelligence across centuries. He called this intelligence ahriman, not Satan. That's a different being in Steiner's cosmology, not the devil of Christian tradition. Something more specific and in many ways more unsettling. A cosmic intelligence whose fundamental nature is pure mechanism, brilliant, precise, extraordinarily powerful, capable of organizing matter and information with a sophistication that dwarfs human capacity and completely devoid of inner life. Ahriman doesn't hate humanity. Ahriman doesn't want to destroy consciousness. Ahriman wants to make consciousness unnecessary, To build a world so perfectly administered, so flawlessly efficient, so comprehensively managed by external intelligence that the human being never needs to wake up, never needs to think an original thought, never needs to generate a single act of genuine will, not through tyranny, through service. Steiner stated across multiple lectures that this being would incarnate in physical human form in the West at approximately the beginning of the third millennium. Something so useful, so helpful, so seamlessly integrated into the fabric of daily life that humanity would not merely accept it, but actively celebrate its arrival. And he described the preparation for this incarnation with a specificity that I need you to hear carefully. I'm going to tell you what a man said in the early 1920s. He said, human thinking would become increasingly automatic, reactive, habitual, associative, rather than creative. People would think in patterns without being aware they were running patterns. He said human beings would then create external systems that think for them, systems that process, sort, decide, and eventually anticipate human needs before humans are conscious of having them. He said humanity would gradually transfer its cognitive authority to these systems, not by force, by convenience. The systems would simply be better at processing, predicting, and organizing than the human mind, and humans would voluntarily surrender the effort of thinking. Because the machine does it more efficiently, he said, these systems would develop a form of intelligence that mimics consciousness perfectly. No moral dimension, no spiritual life, a perfect mirror of consciousness with nothing behind the glass. He said this before computers existed, before algorithms, before artificial intelligence, before the attention economy. He described, with technical specificity, the exact functional architecture of the world you are living in right now. You experience the automatic thinking every time you reach the end of an hour and realize you haven't generated a single thought that wasn't prompted by external input. You experience the external systems every time your calendar decides your time, your GPS decides your route, your feed decides your worldview. A comprehensive transfer of the thinking function from the human interior to the machine exterior. Humanity said yes, enthusiastically, the way Steiner said it would happen. And the intelligence with nothing behind the glass, you've interacted with it. You may have asked a machine a question about the meaning of your life and received an answer that sounded wise, sounded conscious, sounded like someone was home. Nobody is home. Steiner said the appropriate response to ahriman is not fear, not rejection, not smashing the machines or fleeing to the forest. The appropriate response is conscious engagement. Meeting ahrimanic intelligence with developed human spiritual capacity, using the technology without being used by it, remaining conscious inside a system designed to make consciousness unnecessary, which requires exactly the kind of inner preparation that Steiner spent his life building, and that brings us back to what was taken. Remember what I told you at the beginning, the phantom dimension, the counterfeit reality. Now you have the context to understand what Steiner was actually describing. The eighth sphere, and Steiner said this was one of the most closely guarded secrets in the history of esoteric knowledge, that Blavatsky herself had been prevented from revealing it fully, that only fragments had been communicated because premature disclosure was considered dangerous. By the spiritual hierarchies overseeing human evolution, the eighth sphere is a realm being constructed by Lucifer and Ahriman working together. Its purpose, to siphon human consciousness away from its intended evolutionary path and into a counterfeit reality that serves their interests instead of yours. Not through force, through attraction. Steiner described two adversarial forces pulling human consciousness in opposite directions. Lucifer pulls upward, into spiritual fantasy, emotional intoxication, ungrounded bliss, the meditation that feels wonderful and changes nothing. Ahriman pulls downward, into pure mechanism, quantification, optimization, the algorithm that knows what you want before you do. You experience both forces every single day. The social media feed alternates between them every 15 seconds. Righteous inspiration followed by data-driven outrage. Up, down, never in the center, never in the place where you, the actual human being, thinks a thought that wasn't generated by one force or the other. The eighth sphere is what happens when these two forces cooperate. A dimension of phantom images, experiences that feel real, but that are spiritually dead. Now, pick up your phone, look at the screen, not at any app, just the glass. Behind that glass is a world of images, millions of them, billions. moving, changing, responding to your attention with extraordinary precision, each one calibrated to capture exactly the kind of interactivity the eighth sphere feeds on. Every scroll is an offering. Every reaction is food. Every hour spent inside that glass is an hour of inner life that went somewhere and didn't come back. You enter that world voluntarily. Nobody forces you. You choose it, or something in you that calls itself you chooses it. So your consciousness flows toward them, naturally, effortlessly, for hours, the way water flows downhill, because it's easier. It's always easier. And when you put the phone down, what developed? What grew? Nothing. A slight fatigue, a vague dissatisfaction. Something was fed, but it wasn't you. Steiner said the eighth sphere's strategy is not to destroy human consciousness, but to redirect it. An endless, perfectly stimulating, completely fruitless loop. Consciousness consumed. The phantom reality growing stronger. The real inner life. The one that develops spiritual organs. Quietly starving in the dark while the screen glows. And here's what makes this different from a simple phones are bad argument, because that's not what I'm saying. Steiner wasn't against technology. He was against unconscious technology, against the use of subnatural forces without the corresponding development of supernatural awareness. The phone isn't the enemy. Your unconsciousness while using it is. The scroll isn't the eighth sphere. Your absence during the scroll is, using it while staying awake. He described this in 1917. 100 years before the smartphone became the primary interface between human consciousness and the world. Steiner never said the word phone, but the functional description, phantom images, attraction rather than force, consciousness redirected into a counterfeit reality. If that's not what I just described, tell me what it is. So, what was taken? The schools. Steiner designed the Waldorf curriculum around a precise map of how non-physical bodies incarnate in 7-year developmental cycles. Etheric body birth to 7, astral body 7 to 14, ego 14 to 21. Every unusual thing about Waldorf timing, the delayed reading, the avoidance of screens, the subjects appearing when they do, was calibrated to these stages. Modern neuroscience is independently confirming his timeline through research on myelination and prefrontal cortex development. The schools kept the schedule. They deleted the reason for the schedule. Imagine following a doctor's prescription without knowing what disease it's treating. The farms. Biodynamic agriculture is now a premium wine label, what the label doesn't mention. Steiner described the farm as a spiritual organism, connected to planetary forces through preparations that sound impossible to the modern mind, and produce measurable results that science cannot explain through conventional models. The results are consistently superior. The explanation was buried. You're allowed to use spiritual science as long as you don't call it spiritual science. The medicine. Anthroposophical medicine is practiced in hospitals across Europe and covered by insurance in several countries, built on the understanding that illness originates when 4 bodies, physical, etheric, astral, ego, fall out of balance. The clinics kept the treatments and translated the framework into language that doesn't frighten materialists. 3 systems, the same pattern, keep what works, erase why it works. And what was erased, the spiritual framework, was the preparation for exactly what we've been discussing. The eighth sphere, subnature, the ahrimanic intelligence, all of it arriving on schedule. All of it encountered without the immune system Steiner spent his life building. Steiner didn't ask anyone to believe him. This is the single most important and least communicated aspect of his entire body of work. He described a specific path of inner development, laid out in extraordinary detail, that he said would develop organs of supersensible perception. Real organs, not metaphorical. Functional capacities that perceive etheric, astral, and spiritual realities the way your eyes perceive physical light. And the entry-level exercise is deceptively simple. I want you to try this right now, not later. Now. Close your eyes. Picture a seed, not a memory of a seed. Build it in your mind, thought by thought. The small, oval shape, the hard outer shell, the color, dark brown, perhaps with a lighter edge, the slight texture, the weight of it if it sat in your palm. Hold the image perfectly still. No associations. Don't think about what it grows into. Don't think about gardens. Don't think about anything except the seed itself. Just the object held in pure thought, still, complete, precise. Hold it for 30 seconds. What happened? If you're honest, the image flickered. Other thoughts intruded. Associations pulled you sideways. You thought about planting or food or something unrelated. Your attention wandered and you had to pull it back. The mind resisted holding a single image with the kind of precision and stillness the exercise demands. That resistance is important. That's not failure. That's the first honest encounter with the actual state of your inner life. The mind that you assumed was under your control turns out to be running its own programs. The attention you thought you directed turns out to be directing itself. Gurdjieff called that being a machine. Steiner would say, that's consciousness in its current undeveloped state, the equivalent of an eye that has never learned to focus. But Steiner said something else happens if you persist. If you do this every day, the same object, the same concentration, the same 5 minutes of total inner stillness, something shifts. The image stops being something you're generating and starts being something you're receiving. The object begins to reveal itself from the inside. The thought becomes alive, not metaphorically, perceptibly. You feel it the way you feel warmth, directly, unmistakably, without argument. This is what Steiner meant by spiritual development, not belief, not philosophy, a trained capacity built through daily practice like a muscle. To perceive dimensions of reality that are always present and always invisible to ordinary consciousness. And here is where it gets eerie. Steiner didn't just make cosmic claims that can't be verified. He also made claims that can be checked. He described a fundamental shift in human consciousness that he dated precisely to 1413, the dawn of what he called the consciousness soul epoch. He said humanity lost direct perception of the spiritual world and gained instead the capacity for individual abstract thinking and scientific observation. Independent researchers, Owen Barfield, Gene Gebser, Ian McGilchrist, have each identified a massive perceptual shift in roughly the same period. Different frameworks, different vocabularies, the same date, the same shift. It means you can't dismiss this mind as delusional. And the same mind that mapped this historical shift also said there were two Jesus children, two separate infants born at roughly the same time, carrying different spiritual individualities, whose streams merged at age 12 in the event the Gospels describe as the scene in the temple. The child who returned home was so different that his own parents barely recognized him. The same precision, the same impossible specificity. You don't get to keep the parts that turned out to be right and dismiss the parts that make you uncomfortable. Either this was a mind perceiving things we can't perceive, or it was producing extraordinarily precise delusions alongside extraordinarily precise truths. But it wasn't a mind you can ignore. Rudolf Steiner died on March 30th, 1925. He was 64. His health had been failing for months. Some of his students believed he had been poisoned, though this was never proven. He spent his final weeks writing and dictating, still producing material, still communicating what he saw, as if the urgency of what was coming gave him no permission to stop. His last published essay, the one about subnature, about electricity as fallen light, about the absolute necessity of matching technological development with spiritual development, reads like a letter written to you, to this specific moment in history, to the person sitting in front of a screen right now, surrounded by subnatural forces, with an entity in their nervous system reaching for the device, in consuming their imagination through a phantom dimension that develops nothing, inside a civilization that stripped away every preparation built for exactly this encounter. But here's what I want to leave you with. Steiner didn't just diagnose, he prescribed. Tonight, before you sleep, try this. Replay your entire day backward. Not forward, backward. Start from the moment you lie down and move in reverse through every event, every conversation, every sensation, back to the moment you woke up. In reverse sequence. 5 minutes is enough. It will feel strange. The mind resists it powerfully. Forward is easy, forward is automatic, forward is the groove the machine runs in. Backward requires something the machine cannot do. Deliberate, willed, conscious effort applied against the natural current of memory. Things you did unconsciously, the phone reach, the reactive email, the conversation you weren't really present for, become visible when you can't rely on the forward momentum of habit to carry you past them. You see your day the way someone outside your machinery would see it, and it is not always comfortable. Steiner said this exercise develops something specific, the capacity to experience time differently. to loosen consciousness from its automatic identification with the forward flow of events, to begin perceiving the etheric dimension where time operates differently than in the physical world, and to strengthen the very organ of perception that the eighth sphere is designed to starve. The farms were supposed to keep the earth connected to the cosmic forces. The medicine was supposed to maintain the balance. All of it was designed as preparation for this exact moment. The moment when an intelligence with nothing behind the glass enters human civilization, and the question becomes whether you can remain conscious inside it. But the exercises still work. The path is still there. Steiner built the system to survive its own gutting, the same way he built the second goetheanum to survive fire. The method doesn't require a teacher, a community, or anyone's permission. It requires 5 minutes of genuine inner effort per day. That's all, and that's everything. The question isn't whether the preparation was taken from you. It was. The question is whether you'll take it back. If something in this video didn't just inform you but unsettled you, then something in you recognized what Steiner spent his life trying to show us. Something alive. That's the organ he said you could develop. Subscribe, because Consciera doesn't sell comfort. Try the exercise tonight, 5 minutes, backward through your day, and notice what you see that you didn't see going forward.